It seems like it's been 40 weeks since you got 40 winks. Your back pain? Unbearable. Tossing, turning, trying to find that pain-free position. And that's the moment you realize you can't spend another waking moment putting off treatment.
The Joint and Spine Center is Cincinnati's leading destination for spine care, with a ton of surgical and non-surgical treatments for back pain. So when a moment has the power to change the rest of your life, go to the one place with the power to change it for the better, the Christ Hospital Health Network. This changes everything.
The Pound This podcast is brought to you by Sway, artfully crafted, ready-to-drink cocktails from Mad Tree Brewing. This is episode 770, The Impacts of Stress and Solutions with Lindsey Schmitt.
I want to lose weight, but I don't know how to get started.
What should I meal prep every week?
How do I get those sweet booty gains?
Inspiration for your healthy lifestyle. The Pound This podcast with Amanda Valentine.
Hello, friends. Before I get into this conversation all about stress with Lindsey, I want to tell you about my friend Sarah and Team Fit With Me. If you're looking for a great health coach that can help you with your nutrition, with your physical fitness, with your mindset, Sarah and her whole team has got you covered, including if you have gut health conditions, thyroid diseases, PCOS, hormonal dysfunction. Sarah can help you with all of that. And guess what? Sarah is going to be in person at my Pound This party, which is happening at Mad Tree Brewing in Cincinnati, August 6th. And I hope that you join me for a day of live podcast and wellness. I got the link for that in my show notes. So hopefully if you work with Sarah or you want to work with Sarah, you can come out to the event and meet her in person. Otherwise, you can link up with Sarah, ask her as many questions as you want, and have a great health coach. And right now you can get 10% off month one of all packages, plans, and add-on services when you go to teamfitwithme.com/poundthis, and you're going to find all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This podcast. I am Amanda Valentine. My guest today is holistic nutritionist and health and wellness coach, Lindsey Schmitt. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me, Amanda.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. We had a conversation. We kind of just met each other a few weeks ago, and we had a very full hour of conversations going all over the place on health and wellness. And we're like, man, we have so many things to talk about. How do we narrow it down? So we've kind of narrowed it down. I mean, narrow it as this massive topic of stress and talking all about that and, how that's affecting literally every one of us. So I want to get into that topic, obviously, but before we get there, I kind of wanted to talk about you and your background and your interest in health and nutrition and getting to the expertise where you are now.
Definitely. So I, as you said, holistic nutritionist, health and wellness coach. I kind of came into the wellness world, so to speak, through being a group fitness instructor. So I've been teaching fitness classes for roughly 24 years. I jokingly say I'm back to, the grapevine days and step aerobics. We had a good laugh in my class this morning because we pulled out the step benches. We have a Mix It Up Monday class. And they always look at me and say, I thought you were too young to be able to teach step. I said, no, I am older than I look. I've been around the sun a few times. And so step aerobics is where I started. I've gotten several trainings. I'm kind of addicted and passionate about learning all the time. So for years and years, I took different fitness trainings. And then as I started to have more conversations with members in my classes and friends, it was more than just fitness. They realized their wellness needs, you can't outrun your fork, I think is what we like to say. So they wanted to talk about food, and they wanted to talk about how to lose weight, and they wanted to talk about all these different topics that I didn't feel like I had the background in. So that drove me into becoming a health and wellness coach first. And then as I took a deeper dive into food, I realized I wanted to be more holistic. I wanted to coach people mind, body, and spirit. Although I think food is really important, I think you have to deal with the whole person, which is why this topic today is so critical. Because when I coach people, I look at 6 different pillars of wellness. And the obvious ones for everyone that you're thinking are probably food, rest, meaning 2-pronged, both your sleep as well as your mental rest, your ability to take those stress breaks. And then the third one is movement. Everyone's like, those are the obvious wellness pillars. But I start people with their mindset. There's a lot that we have to dig into about our relationship with food, about where we come from, our history, our emotional eating patterns, and then do you think you're going to be successful in this process? And what is your overall mindset? So we work on that. Preparation is one of my unique pillars because I truly believe in the 6 Ps. I believe that you have to prepare for everything to be successful. And I know that was one topic that Amanda and I got on a tangent when we talked before was meal prep.
Yeah.
Because meal prep is huge. And whether you subscribe to that or not, you still have to prepare, at least mentally prepare what you're going to be eating and thinking about that. And the final one is community. Community is a really important part of our emotional health and wellness, and also to support you through any kind of wellness goals you have and living a healthy lifestyle is recognizing that we have a physical community of people, but there's a virtual community out there now that we can tap into. So those are kind of the 6 unique pillars that I coach on. And I'm especially interested in coaching the whole person, again, like mind, body, spirit. And that's why this issue on May 2nd, from when we're talking right now, the beginning of May, generally speaking, is even more critical because I think we kind of ramp up before summer. Some of us might be moms, parents, and we're looking at all these activities going on in our life, and it causes more stress. So it's a great topic.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know how any of us really avoids it, but it feels like, I mean, obviously you went through the stress of being in a global pandemic, and that has its own stressors that no one knew how to deal with, obviously, because none of us have lived through that before, except maybe a handful of people and that were here in 1918. But it's like on top of that, though, it just feels like that propelled us the past 2 years. At least in personal opinion, it feels like it propelled us into this whole new way of life that feels even more like faster and more stressful. And it feels somehow like there's no time in the day. And like, I know just one small example I have with my podcast is when the pre-pandemic, I was doing 5 episodes a week. And that's what helped me grow this podcast. And it was used as like, you know, people could use it as a daily ritual. And now I'm down to 1 episode a week, not only just because of the workload on me, but it's because I listened to the listeners of this podcast that are like, I don't have time for that anymore. I have time for 1 if I'm going to choose 1. There's just too much other stuff going on. And so it's like we went from 2019 where that was the standard and great, we can do 5 episodes a week, we want that, to here we're in 2022 to be like, I don't even know if I can do 1. It's like, what the frick happened in the past couple of years that all of a sudden we're like even more and more like overwhelmed and have even more and more things to do. Like, it feels like, I don't know, it feels like to me like we're rushing up to some sort of breaking point. I don't know if you are feeling the same way with you and your clients. That's just how I feel.
Definitely. And I think that for a moment, it caused everyone to have this quick prescription that we all needed. Like, hey, stay at home. Like, how nice is it to hear when you're really busy, hey, stay at home for a week. But then we had to go through that period of lockdown. And now we have to like kind of reacclimate, and we're probably not to the level that society expects us to be with our ability to do it all again. You know, I think there were some really great lessons learned actually during the pandemic about slowing down when we were able to. And now that we're kind of coming out of that time, we're expected to, you know, let's go full force again, and let's do even more than before, because you know what, now we can do so much more virtually than we ever did before. So we do all the virtual things, all the in-person things. It just seems like the demands on us are getting doubled.
Yeah.
I definitely feel that.
So how do we deal, or first off, how is that stress affecting us?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked, because I think once you really understand the stress hormone cortisol and unpack it, it will get you more motivated to do some of the techniques I'm going to talk about today. But if I just launch into the techniques and you don't have the background of understanding what cortisol does to our entire body, then it's a moot point. You're not going to feel that motivation. So the first thing I want to mention is that it's not that just that Amanda and I think stress is an important topic. One of the CDC reports that has recently come out, and you know, I don't want to keep talking about the pandemic, but of the 540,000 people that they studied that were hospitalized, the second risk factor for severe outcomes, including death, was anxiety and fear-related disorders. I'm not sure we're hearing that message enough. The first risk factor was obesity. We're probably hearing a little bit of that. But to go back to stress, anxiety, fear-related disorders, why is that happening? So it goes back to understanding cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It has been slightly demonized because of the connection to weight. and what it does to our insulin production, which I'll get to. But it shouldn't be demonized. It's really a hormone that our body produces naturally in a wave curve. It should be being produced early in the morning between 6 and 9 a.m. should be kind of your peak of cortisol. And then you should be riding the downward part of the wave throughout the day. And then close to nighttime is when we want melatonin, our sleep hormone, to kick in, which is why people, supplement with melatonin if they're having sleep issues. But it's something that naturally our body is making. Our adrenal glands are making cortisol. Now, the part we have to unpack, though, is this constant stress that we're under. Our adrenal glands will trigger cortisol, which will then trigger glucose when we're in a kind of life-threatening fight or flight situation. But the problem is stress is completely generic now. So that means back in the day, we were like running from a tiger, or we had to go hunt down dinner, and it was like actually a full body stress situation. And now it could be sitting in traffic, being late for work, having a demanding schedule, feeling like you go, 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 go. And it's more of a mental stress. Yet your body's response is still, I'm going to store the glucose. I need glucose for my large muscles. And then when it doesn't get used, because we're not fighting a dragon, we're not running, we're not doing any of these crazy things that we had to do historically, we're not using those large muscles, then what happens to all that extra glucose sitting around is it gets stored as fat. It gets stored as adipose tissue, generally around your organs and then in your belly area. And so many people get frustrated. They're doing all the right things. They think they're doing all the right things. And they're eating right. They're moving right. And they're like, I can't get rid of this stomach fat. I can't get rid of this belly. And that can be part of what cortisol is doing to us. It's getting stored. So, and the other tricky part about that is it leads to chronic inhibition of insulin production. And that over time also then makes you feel starved. It makes you have a high appetite. So even though you don't need it, your body's being triggered. So that's one of the big problems with when we're constantly under these like states of high cortisol, high stress. And then what does our body do with the glucose? I mean, it will gradually diminish the release of cortisol, but what are we doing with that glucose that we keyed up in our system? And the other thing that's really a problem is that we haven't quite understood how it interacts with our reproductive system, but it does. It has a very negative effect because if your body is chronically cueing the adrenal glands, make cortisol, your hormones are kind of in a cascade and they actually run off of pregnenolone. And cortisol will steal from pregnenolone to be made. And pregnenolone is supposed to be making testosterone, it's supposed to be making estrogen, it's supposed to be making progesterone. And when it's not making those things, then you have a hormone imbalance in your body. And we know hormone health is so important. As we age, we're not going to make as much of those hormones in different areas of our body. And then we're imbalanced. And that high stress is another thing causing that imbalance. So the list goes on, but that's why we have to start to manage it better. We have to start to recognize it, come up with individual techniques. And yes, you can measure it. You could do cortisol measurements. You could have it checked. The problem with that is unless you got really deep dive into doing it on your own, if you get it tested, if they're going to draw blood, they're going to test you, do whatever. Usually that's in that moment. So you could be highly stressed. So instead of worrying about testing it, just managing it through the techniques, managing your stress, I think is much more viable option for most of us.
So what are the techniques that we can do to start working on this? Because I feel like that's the part that's incredibly hard. I think that all of us understand that we're stressed out and we can feel it and we know that it's affecting our sleep and it's our everyday life. But how do you actually take the time to de-stress? I mean, I find myself in that loop too, where you're just kind of like, I have so many things to do. You're running at 100 miles an hour and that's the expectation now. Like, how do you back that off and actually try to calm everything down?
So I'm going to give you a lot of ideas, but the one thing I would say is in your mind while you're listening to this right now is to think about what's one change I'm going to commit to tomorrow after I hear all these ideas. Like, what's something that resonates with me? Because when we try to do too many things, the last thing I want someone to do is be stressed out listening to this.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, I can't do all these things. I don't have time for these things. Like, don't approach it that way. That's part of our problem. Like, we're feeding into more stress by having more expectation. Instead, like, open your mind to what resonates with me right now. So I'm going to start with mindset because it's one of my pillars. A couple things is first to assess the situations we're in. we might not be able to change our job, our life real quickly, but we can change the way we respond to things. So really knowing your controllables, like stepping aside. I think as I get older, as my children get older, we get a little bit more wise. I know what I can control and what I can't. And I don't get as triggered, and that's taken time and practice. But knowing like, okay, my mindset is within my control. My mood and energy is within my control. My morning routine is within my control. My movement is within my control. My media consumption is within my control. Like, go back to what you can control. And that was really important for me during the pandemic, because there's so much outside of our control. And if you spin your wheels on things that are stressing you out that you cannot control, that's going to feed into that high level of cortisol that we don't want. And also, this sounds simple, but start practicing telling your brain that you're safe. When we talked about the fight or flight situation, if you start to, whether it's through a mantra or an affirmation, something I like to say to myself is, everything is right. God is in control. I am safe. I am loved. So, and if you don't want the spiritual element, everything is good. I am safe. I am loved. If we start to repeat things to ourselves, signal our brain that we are okay. We are okay. So I think knowing your controllables, having that strong mindset, and it sounds so simple, but honestly, when you get into a situation and you feel yourself starting to maybe breathe differently, have something you can say to yourself. Come up with your own mantra that makes sense to you, that doesn't make you giggle or laugh, that really resonates with you. And breath work. Breath work is huge. And I find myself relying on this more, whether you like to do box breathing, whether you want to do deep diaphragmatic breathing. But when you get in those situations, again, use your breath work. I think preparation too. Preparing your day, preparing ahead of time, making your to-do list. Like, the more prepared we are, the better we feel in the moment when someone throws us a curveball. Like, we can handle it. When you go into each day, and I've had this before when I didn't take time to plan, and then something throws you off, and then something else throws you off, and you weren't even prepared for what you needed to do, you've contributed to your own stress level. So just being a little bit more prepared, planning. I know everyone talks about the magic of the morning, but also the magic of your evening. You should have an evening routine, which I'll talk about also when I talk about sleep. But sleep is a huge key factor, but routines throughout your day are so important to kind of calm your system. I think we think of the end caps. Some people, most people, I think, have good morning routines, even if they're short now. Maybe some people are talking about evening routines. What about the middle of your day? Like, what can you habit stack around a regular lunch hour? What could you do for 10 minutes? Could you take a walk? Could you pull up a meditation app for 5 minutes? Like, how can we habit stack some self-care throughout our day? So it's not like, I have a practice in the morning, I have a practice in the evening. How can you prepare and plan your day, not just your to-do list, but how do you plan and prepare your self-care? Maybe it's habit stacking some dry brushing before you get in the shower for your lymphatic system. Maybe it's an Epsom salt bath at the end of the night. But like, we need to start to think outside the box of something we enjoy that can just be rejuvenating just for us. And again, it shouldn't be do all these things, just do one thing a little bit differently tomorrow. And sleep. Sleep is so critical, and it does tie into cortisol. So the problem with sleep is, if we have elevated levels of cortisol, our to-do list is always going. If we're having caffeine and alcohol, which should be reduced, that could be an easy action step for everyone to take. No caffeine after 12 p.m. and limit your alcohol, or take it out completely at least 3 hours before bed. That will interrupt your sleep, and actually both of those things spike your cortisol as well. So sleep is critical. When our cortisol is elevated when it shouldn't be, then we're not getting that deep, restful sleep. We're not getting all the benefits of our sleep cycle. So we want that melatonin kicking in, not the cortisol at night. Community also, think about the people in your life who bring you joy, who make you laugh. Think about the people who stress you out. And think about what you need to do in terms of all those relationships. They always say we're a total of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So when you think about your life and your stress, you need people in your life that help you mitigate your stress and help you enjoy your life. Obviously, there are people that we work with, there are people that we live with that might contribute to that. And those are important maybe awareness is, maybe not something we can do something about right away, but include those people and those community members that are going to help you, that are on the same wavelength.
That's awesome. And one thing I would like to add to the list, at least I found personally helpful, and I didn't realize the science behind it until I started reading Dr. Perry and Oprah's book, is just rhythmic activities and how much that soothes you, like walking or being on a swing. And I know walking has always been really super helpful for me. So for me, I'm like, oh, I'm just going for a walk. I'm moving my body, but also you're just in a rhythm and you're just kind of like calming down your central nervous system by doing something that's in a rhythm like that. And I found that really personally helpful. I just like dig rocking chairs and just getting out and going. And I guess, and with walking too, I guess never underestimate the power of just even a short walk. Of like, people feel like you need to go out and hit a 5K, like just go walk around the block. And it's better than nothing.
If you could just habit stack that again, like if you have the ability at lunchtime to go outside even for 5 minutes, or even like stand outside for lunch, for part of the day, like keep doing those little steps, like stand instead of sit, walk instead of stand. We don't have to make it so difficult. Just that up level. And on the other note is being outside in nature. And you don't always have to move your body in nature. Just sit, this time of year, especially, take your cup of coffee outside in the morning with your morning routine. Sit in a chair. And if you can have a shaded area, if you have to do some laptop work, can you do it outside? Because there are real benefits to being in nature. Moving in nature is even better, like you said, taking a walk. But just sitting outside, getting the fresh air. First thing in the morning is one of the keys too with cortisol. If you can get out first thing in the morning within an hour or two of waking, the light receptors in your eye trigger your circadian rhythm and help you make cortisol when you should be making cortisol. So it sounds like an inverse piece of advice, but if you want to sleep better, you should get up and go for a walk in the morning, even a short one right away, and that will help you trigger cortisol when you need to make it.
So how long did it take you to try to figure some of these things out for yourself?
And you know what? I entered into each one differently. I think that really the mindset piece was really the first thing I needed to do because, like you said at the beginning, there's so much going on in our life. I can't change all of the things externally around me, but I can change my own mind. I can change the way I deal with it, the way I approach it. My spirituality is really important to me. So a lot of people like to do meditation and affirmations. I'm more of a prayer/affirmation person. And I think that has helped me the most because I have a lot of trust in my faith life. And that's helped me just kind of slow down and realize there's a lot of things that don't need to all be done at one time. And all my self-care doesn't have to be perfect either. So, I think when we hear all these lists, we're like, oh, there's so many more things I should be doing. It's like, that's the wrong idea. The idea is what motivates you? What do you hear and connect with that sounds restorative to you? Because some things work for some people and some things work for other people.
Yeah. And I think you brought this up earlier too. It's so important. And, I'm guilty of this, of then putting like guilt and shame and stress on yourself when you miss some of those things of like, oh, I was supposed to go on a walk today for lunch and I didn't. And then you get stressed and like, whoa, that's like the opposite effect of just like, it's okay. Let it go. Next opportunity you get. But I think we're just so like keyed up in everything that we're just so quick to get like angry and frustrated and mad at ourselves and talk down to ourselves to like, if you're doing these things to take care of yourself and you miss a beat, perfectionism is going to cause more stress than anything. So I think it's also like it's having, like you said, having a plan, having a goal. But if you miss it, then don't stress yourself out over it. There's another opportunity to do it again.
And it bears mentioning that not all stress is bad, and it's okay to have a level of stress that you can handle. Like we want homeostasis. So it's hard to know without constantly monitoring it in a technical fashion, but I think we get feedback. Our body gives us feedback. If you're constantly worrying, if you're breathing hard, if you're snapping at people, if people around you will give you feedback too. But it's not that we don't want any stress at all. It's that how do we handle it? How do we mitigate it? How are we feeling at the end of the day? Are we sleeping at night? Like that's another indicator. If you've got racing brain at night or in the middle of the night when you go to the bathroom, then there's work to be done.
So when you well, first off, are you taking like new coaching clients, and is this something that you kind of focus on whenever you do coach your clients?
Yes, I am taking clients right now. I have space for that. And I do always focus, part of every conversation, I ask them about their self-care, and depending on how they're sleeping and how the intake form, when I read through their intake form, I can identify how much focus we need to give to stress management, and maybe they're managing well. I can usually tell pretty quickly if this needs to be our first focal point. People always want to dive right into food. Like, give me a food plan, give me a movement plan. And I'm like, slow down. You're only sleeping 5 hours at night. Let's talk about that, and talk about the rating you gave your stress right now. And it's like, no, I that's for later. It's like, no, it's all part of you. It's part of your wellness. It's part of your whole being. So, and to think of us in our day-to-day, and we said this at the beginning, this 24-hour go, we've become these human doings. We're always like doing. We need to reconnect with our human being. Who are we? Who are we showing up in every day in the world? And which is something actually that retreat coming up that we're really focusing on, is that being part of reconnecting with who we are. Because I think we're just trying to generate so much. We can generate more than we've ever been able to do before. From a production standpoint, whether that's services or products, and it's just never ending. So if we don't focus on who we are and how we're showing up, we're always focusing on what we're doing, it's never ending. That list will never go away. So
you're going to be a part of a retreat that's happening in Cincinnati later this summer. So give me all the details and the rundown of that, of when and where and what's going to happen in the process of being there.
Sure, definitely. So the name of the retreat is Connect. And the theme is that, just like I said before, that we are connecting with who we are as humans. We're connecting with other people, that we're human beings, not human doings. And there are 3 coaches leading the retreat. Myself, Krista Powers, who is an executive coach and a life coach, and Reagan Brown, who is a desire coach. So we're also talking about masculine, feminine energy. I'm doing a deep dive on hormone balance, holistic hormone health. And Chris is going to really help us unpack this human being, who we are, who we show up in the world. And just taking that time aside as women to do that is really important. So the dates are June 23rd through June 26th. Actually 25th, June 23rd to June 25th. And it's in Mount Eden, Eden Park area. Okay,
awesome. So where would you get more details about the retreat and also about your health coaching?
So they can contact me through my website, bestlifewithlindsey.com. There's areas that you can message me through there, through email. I'm on Instagram, Lindsey Schmitt. I also have Facebook, Best Life with Lindsey. All the information is there.
Awesome. Well, I know we've already discussed that we're going to do a future episode all about hormonal health, which I think is just huge. And I already asked you the question from our last conversation. I'm like, I have Hashimoto's disease and, looking into that. And one of my friends just messaged me this weekend that she was just diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease. And she's like, oh my God, tell me all the things. I'm like, oh my God, you tell me all the things. I don't really know. I haven't studied as much as I should have. So definitely the hormone conversation is going to be huge. So, I mean, man, you're just covering all the really big topics here of stress, obviously affecting all of us, and hormones affecting all of us as well. So I look forward to our future conversation, and I'll put all of your information in the show notes. And Lindsey, thank you so much for this conversation. It was super helpful.
Good. Well, it was a pleasure to be here with you.
AmandaValentineBites.com